again, and there was coverage by multiple Canadian papers, local papers in Toronto. Including ads and some very nice coverage in the Toronto World, the Mail, the Telegram, and others. And here's just brief snippets of the coverage. Shakespeare as a topic was a little less controversial. Some people might say that the reason they decided to cover it because it wasn't quite so theologically based. He stuck a few little jabs in here and there in Shakespeare, but on the whole, it was a very moving tribute to Shakespeare. And I'll just give you a couple quick quotes from that. As a matter of fact, there has never sat on any throne a king, a queen, an emperor who could have honored William Shakespeare. There was nothing within the range of human thought, within the horizon of intellectual effort, that he did not touch. He knew the brain and heart of man, the theories, customs, superstition, hopes and fears, vices and virtues of the human race. April 1893. Again, this one, I do know there were lectures in Toronto, Hamilton, and London. I have a couple of dates open on this one. There might actually have been a couple more. On the 20th, he delivered Robert Burns at the auditorium. It was a good-sized audience. It was very well received again, and again it was very well covered by the local papers. Times have changed in 13 years. Hamilton on the 21st. Shakespeare was delivered at the Grand Opera House. There were about 300 in the audience for this one, moderate audience. Again, well received by the audience as all the report as the papers that I have covered for the coverage. I was wondering if there's going to be booing and hissing. I've never encountered a single lecture where there was booing and hissing with Ingersol, which surprises me. I always thought, given his thing, there would have been a lot. I have one time at one lecture where one person started hissing, and the rest of the crowd just crushed him. they were just shut up, Shakespeare again, London on the 22nd. This one, a little disappointment because I don't have any coverage that I could find for it. Again, if anybody lives around the London area and can find something and can forward it to me, I'd appreciate it much. Conclusion. He visited Canada 4 times, again as part of 4 different lecture tours. And how was he received? Rather shaky start, but over time, censorship gave way to openness. Audience sizes increased. Hostility changed to toleration, if not admiration. Many of the later newspaper reports of him were actually glowing, talking about his eloquence as a speaker and how what a fantastic job he was doing and how he reached people no matter what they believed. For these changes, we can credit Ingersol and other freethinkers, such as B.F. Underwood, a man who in 1874 was doing much the same work. I'm curious about this guy now. Benjamin Franklin Underwood is American. Alan Pringle and James Spencer Ellis were Canadians who seemed to be pushing the cause of free thought, many others, I'm sure. And Charles Bradlaugh and Charles Watts of English origin. These men and many men and women working together and seem to change the opinion of Canadians over time, over the span of 13, 14 years. I'd like to thank the Library and Archives Canada in Ottawa, the County of Lexington and Eddington Museums and Archive in Napanee, Bellevue Public Library in Bellevue, and the Center for Inquiry Libraries. Where's Tim?
Tim had to head home.
Oh, in Amherst.
I'll tell him you thank him.
Okay. Because I've still got their microphones. They're going to charge me overdue fine and I'm bankrupt. And I'm always seeking local volunteers to check up for possible missed lectures and increase what is known about events already cataloged. This is especially needed for the April 1880 lecture tour. You could check at your local libraries. Any coverage I can get for those would be assisting. And if you'd like to help, the Ingersol Chronology Project at www.funigroup.org/Ingersol. And thank you for putting up. Any questions? Tom?
What's that Bell again, where the lecture was canceled, but there seemed to be an indication that it had gone on anyway?
Yeah, that happened a couple of times that I already know about, where another hall was secured, or sometimes he would actually, there's one account where he went out into a field. This is, and they delivered it in the middle of a field, the lecture.
Yeah, I think that was the one in Corning.
That's the one in Corning.
Margaret Sanger, age 7 or so.
Yes.
Attended.
We're giving a little tie into the next possible talks. But yeah, Margaret Sanger in her childhood, in her biography, recalls that Ingersol was to deliver a lecture in Corning, New York, and the local priest, who apparently was somehow involved with the ownership of the theater, had the place padlocked. And pelted Ingersol and others with eggs, but they went off and he delivered the lecture off in a field, and it went on anyway to a good crowd. But I haven't been able to confirm that with any local coverage. Again, I think it's not just a Canadian. There's American cities where I haven't been able to find any coverage either. That I know it went on from other sources, and the local papers had. It's not strictly a Canadian phenomenon. But again, over time, as we went from the 1870s to the 1890s, coverage of him became much more acceptable. He became much less, source. The press said they felt they had to censor, the fact that he was even there. Go ahead.
Where would you say that Ingersol was better received, in the States or in Canada?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a huge amount of data. For the Canadian side, there weren't that many. The experience in the late 1890s was pretty good from the coverage I have. I'd say initially he wasn't received not very well in Canada in the 80s, in the 1880. Well, 1884 was here on the West Coast was much more accepted. But that's true in the United States also as well in that time period. The Western United States was much more inclined to, there was more of a free thought tradition out there because people who had gone off and left the centers of culture in the East and gone off to be on their own. That type of person is much more likely, I think, to be an independent-minded free thinker than is someone who stays back home. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, my question kind of follows from the previous question. In the U.S., when Ingersol began as like his early on when he was coming out to give major public speeches, was there a similar pattern as to in Canada where there'd be mass media ignorance, like a failure to acknowledge the speeches or a failure to review them or review them negatively, or
in some places? In some places, yes. And typically it was more likely to be your small towns. Your major cities, Boston, New York, they tended to be open to him the very first time they would cover the lecture. They might not cover it, they might not give it a positive spin by any means. They say negative things about it. But typically it was your smaller towns.
And were there similar negative counter responses, like incidences of mayors saying, no, it's not going to happen, or, fire drills, whatever?
They tried to have him arrested for blasphemy in New Jersey at the Hoboken. The Hoboken, New Jersey event was, he used a very interesting, they threatened to have him arrested if he delivered the lecture. So he gave the lecture in a very roundabout way, saying things